Welcome into the PFF NFL Daily. Today discussing the Cleveland Browns and the return of quarterback Deshaun Watson this week against his former team, the Houston Texans. So, Sam, I want to get into Deshaun Watson's return, what to expect from him. Hasn't played football in a long time, but also just kind of look back at the 4-7 Browns. I don't think we expected them to be 4-7 at this time. Underwhelming this year. We thought Deshaun Watson was coming into, probably a playoff race here as we head into week 13, and that's not exactly the case.
Yeah, it's funny because this was definitely a plausible scenario when the final suspension was handed down, and we knew that we'd be missing 11 games of Deshaun Watson, and what that meant was 11 games of Jacoby Brissett. So there's definitely a world where you're like, 11 games of Jacoby Brissett feels like too many. You're going to end up he's going to turn into a pumpkin. You're going to get that 55 PFF grade Jacoby where he's making a bunch of mistakes, not making enough big plays, and that's going to cost him some wins. But actually, I think they've gotten a better version of Jacoby Brissett than they could possibly have expected they would have gotten. His PFF grade at the end of this is going to be 82.5, 75.5 as a passer, which is good. I mean, it's by far the best of his career. It's a 2-to-1 interception or touchdown interception ratio for what that's worth, 7.1 yards per attempt. Jacoby's played pretty well. And the problem is other aspects of the roster haven't been good enough. And what they thought was, a championship caliber roster that just needed a Deshaun Watson to come in and help them, win a championship might not actually be that good and has been bad enough or problematic enough in some areas to undermine what I think has been reasonable play from Brissett at quarterback.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Brissett, he's exceeded expectations, had some really good games, had some below average games in there too, but overall, Browns should be thrilled with what Jacoby Brissett gave them. The offense hasn't been the issue in Cleveland. They're still running the ball effectively with Nick Chubb and that good offensive line. All of that has been good. It's the defense that's let them down. Despite a nice effort on Sunday to shut down the Bucs late and secure that victory to go to 4-7, the Bucs defense has been an absolute disaster, particularly against the run. One of the weakest groups of defensive tackles in the league. Linebackers have been hit or miss. Underwhelming production in the secondary from guys like Denzel Ward, John Johnson III for the second straight year. I mean, that has been the issue in Cleveland is their pass coverage well below what we expected. Their pass rush outside of Myles Garrett is just isn't there. In their run defense, there's a few games where they've been absolutely destroyed on the ground.
Yeah, and I think they built this team to try and stop the pass first, and instead of almost the run was an afterthought. The problem is the guys that they've assembled to do that aren't doing it. I mean, Myles Garrett is the one member, I think, of that defense that's really holding up his end of the bargain. He's still arguably the best edge rusher in the NFL, playing as well as anybody right now. It's just nobody else is. Like, nobody is raising their game on a consistent level to meet Myles Garrett where they need to be. And this whole defense built to stop the pass just isn't doing that. And it's been built to stop the pass potentially at the cost of stopping the run. And therefore, it's not doing that either. So the defense just across the board just stinks. And that's the issue.
DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. It's my go-to when betting on the NFL this holiday season. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Check it out. Right now, everyone can earn up to 100% boost with DraftKings stepped-up same-game parlays. You can go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app. You go to the app, place a same-game parlay, combine multiple bets like which team will win, player props, point totals, and more. The more legs you add, the bigger the boost, the bigger your shot to win big. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use code PFF. Place a $5 bet on any NFL team to win their game, and you get $150 in free bets if they win. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with the code PFF. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. All right, let's get to Watson, the player, right now. Not Derwin James, but Deshaun Watson as a player. What do we expect from him? So the last time we saw him was 2020. That was the pandemic year. We had that as Watson's best season, the first time where he actually graded as an elite quarterback. In previous years, the stats were spectacular, but we always graded him, high 70s, low 80s, but he got to that elite level, but it didn't translate to wins. It was one of the best quarterback performances I think we've ever seen for a team that only had 4 wins. What do we expect from Watson as a player now, just 2 years from the last time we saw him?
700 days. I think to the day it's going to be since he last played football. If you don't count the preseason, which given it was like 5
Right.
dropbacks, you probably shouldn't. Also, by the way, so those 5 dropbacks this preseason for the Browns, he looked garbage. But he's never had a good preseason. Like every single preseason of Deshaun Watson's career has been bad. So for multiple reasons, you probably shouldn't read too much into that. But I think there's a very real chance that there's at least a game or two of rust because it's been 2 years since the guy played. And that, I think, is probably a real thing. Like there's a reason we have preseason. There's a reason you practice. There's a reason you have training camp and you don't just roll in there week 1 and expect everything to be firing on all cylinders. I would imagine it will take Deshaun Watson at least a game to knock off that rust, just get back into the flow of things and get anywhere near where he's supposed to be before you get to the idea of, well, okay, now what is a realistic expectation for him within this offense, throwing to the receivers he's throwing to, executing a different offense than he's ever executed before. Like, how does he gel in that system, the whole shebang? So I would imagine, obviously, overall, he should be an upgrade over Jacoby Brissett, but an upgrade this week or this next game, maybe not.
Yeah, it's a unique situation because it's not just a new team. It is, like you said, 700 days off, but it's not him starting the season, right? He doesn't also have all of training camp. So we've got limited practice time for Deshaun Watson. So getting familiar with his top receiver like an Amari Cooper or the tight ends like David Njoku, that's going to take some time. Going back to what Watson had developed into as a player, early in his career, like I said, the stats were always there. Passer rating up over 100, close to 8 yards per attempt the first 3 years of his career, right in that range. But what happened in 2020 was he really cut down on the turnover-worthy plays.
Yeah, and the real thing for them is they should win this game because it's against Houston. It's a gimme. Even if Deshaun Watson comes in and he's rusty and doesn't look like himself, they should win the game anyway. But realistically, after that, they need to win out if he has any shot of making the playoffs anyway. But their schedule after that is at Cincinnati, home to Baltimore, home to New Orleans, at Washington, at Pittsburgh. Those are actually all winnable games. Cincinnati obviously is the toughest one there, but theoretically, if Deshaun Watson does hit the ground running, or at least only takes one game to knock the rust off, like they could legitimately win out, which would only put them at 10 wins. Like it might not be enough anyway to make the playoffs, but that would make things interesting if Deshaun Watson came in, played well, and the Browns won out.
Okay, so that's the question, right? We were expecting the Browns to be a better team this year, right? We thought that their defense would be better. The offense, like we had said, exceeded expectations, I think, with Jacoby Brissett. If they had 6 or 7 wins at this point, or even 5 wins, we'd be talking, maybe they make a little playoff push. Can the Browns actually make a playoff push? Because the AFC, even if they get to 10 wins, the AFC is so loaded.
Yeah.
We're talking right now about teams that are 7-4 are making up that 7 seed if we started the playoffs right now.
I feel like they just lost one too many of those early games when they lost a bunch of close ones. Remember, there was the collapse against the Jets. That was a 30-31 defeat. There was the loss against Atlanta. That was 23-20. There was a loss to the Chargers. That was 30-28. So those 3 games were all decided by, a field goal or less. If they win any one of those 3, now we're talking about a team that's 5-6, is still not in a great situation. But if they won out from that point, they would have, I think they'd have a real shot. Like at that point, you'd be getting to 11 wins. 11 wins probably puts you in a playoff spot.
Yeah, and then as far as the situation goes, you laid it out. Not only the schedule, having this week against the Texans, having the run game to rely on too. I do think they have a path to kind of ease Watson in. Schematically, I'm interested to see if they tap into his rushing ability a little bit. You put him in the backfield now with Nick Chubb in that offensive line. From a football standpoint, there are some things that the Browns can do to expand their offense even. So, again, X's and O's and seeing Watson's development and where he is after 700 days. Interesting storyline this week for the Browns. We'll see if they can make a run here. Let us know. What are your expectations for Deshaun Watson and the Browns? It's the PFF NFL Daily.